Can you build on any land in Idaho? No. I'm going to tell you about 5 things you need to look at hard, and I'll include the biggest mistake most people make that keeps them from building at the end of this video. So, if you've been scrolling land listings and thinking, it's Idaho, it's wide open, of course I could build there, this video could save you a very expensive mistake. Because the short answer, as I just said, is no. You cannot build on any land, no matter how good it looks in photos, no matter how flat it looks on a map, and no matter what the listing description implies. And in the Treasure Valley, we constantly see this. Land that looks buildable, marketed as buildable, but it's not. Buyers don't find out until after they're under contract, when the time is short, due diligence period is running out, and leverage is gone. So today, I'm going to walk you through the real reasons land doesn't build, especially around Boise, Meridian, Kuna, Star, Nampa, Emmett, Eagle, and the surrounding county areas. We're going to cover the 5 big buckets that determine whether or not land is buildable. So, first one, zoning and allowed use. Second one would be legal access. Third, water, and that's both domestic and irrigation, 2 separate things. We'll dive deep into that. You want to look at septic and soils as the 4th point. And the 5th one is environmental and site constraints like floodplain, wetlands, slope, and other restrictions. And if you're buying land in Idaho, especially from out of state, this is essential that you understand it before you write an offer, because land is not like a house. With a house, the hard work's already done. You got the utilities in, the access is done, permits, occupancy, certificate of occupancy. All that's done. With land, you're buying a set of permissions and limitations. And those limitations don't show up in photographs. They don't show up in the drone shot. They don't show up in the shots taken on the ground. No pictures for limitations. A parcel can be flat and still fail septic. It can be right next to other homes and still have no legal access. It can be labeled buildable and still sit in a floodway where you can't build. It can be zoned residential, truly zoned residential, but still not allow what you want to do. It can be almost ready. God, I love that one. Almost ready, just so you know, is probably the most subjective term in development. But it could be almost ready and still need tens of thousands of dollars in improvements. So let's break down why. First, zoning. Zoning tells you what the county or city may allow on the property. But zoning is not a guarantee that you can build exactly what you're imagining. Different jurisdictions and entities have different rules. Ada County has one set, Canyon County has another, the cities have different ones, impact areas have others. It all matters. And zoning can block you in ways that most buyers don't think about. For example, minimum lot size requirements. We see a lot of times people will come in wanting to buy a 5-acre lot, cut it in half, and sell 2.5 acres to offset the acquisition cost. But if you're in an area that's zoned like rural estate or rural urban transition, that's a 10-acre minimum and a 5-acre minimum zone. So if you've bought 5 acres and you want to split it down, but you're RUT, you're not going any lower than that. So, zoning matters. Setbacks that shrink the buildable area. A lot of people think, I can buy a 5-acre lot, I can put X amount of houses on it, but by the time you build in the setbacks, the easements, the streets, and then you start getting to the point where, okay, how can I fit the lots in and the houses on top of them? 5 acres might yield 3.25 acres worth of buildable dirt by the time you're done, and all of a sudden it's not penciling out. So setbacks matter. Height restrictions, which maybe on a vertical condo or townhome type thing, height restrictions are not one that we really deal with a lot as far as limiting what we want to do. Unless you want to build a 50-foot shop, that's usually a problem. I think off the top of my head, I think 35 foot's the limit on most of the height requirements as far as like the counties and the cities. But we can double check that. Anyway, limitations on ADUs, shops, or multiple dwellings. We certainly see that one a lot, and it's usually at the CCR level, not the city or county one. There's rules for manufactured homes. And then you also have animal rights or livestock limitations. Some areas have short-term rental restrictions, and there are restrictions, as I touched on earlier, on splitting the property later if you think you're going to subdivide. So, that one, you need to know that answer before you even write the first offer. So here's the key point. Parcel can be residential, still not allow your plant. And then there's a term you're going to hear that causes a lot of confusion. It's called grandfathered, or my favorite, legal nonconforming. That usually means that something existed on that dirt historically, but the rules have changed, meaning at the time it was built, it was fine and legal and complied with zoning, but zoning changed sometime in the interim. And if the house got taken down, or if you wanted to say you wanted to do a major remodel, take it down to where you had one wall left standing, and then you rebuilt it, they may not allow you to do that. Buyers get burned here because they assume, well, the neighbor has it, so I can do it. Not necessarily. What existed nearby might not be built or not be allowed to be built again today. So before you write an offer, you want really clear answers to questions like, what is the zoning designation? What are the setbacks on the front, side, and rear? Because they're different. Are there minimum build sizes? And that's not the acreage, that's the house size. We often see, matter of fact, I was just involved in writing some CC&Rs on a parcel split we were doing, and the requirement, what became a requirement with the new CC&Rs, was that you couldn't build a home smaller than 2,000 square feet with a attached 3-car garage in this particular piece of dirt. So now you have a CC&R. It's not at the zoning level. It's not at the city or county level. It's literally tied to the parcel through the CC&Rs that you have to build a minimum square footage house, and then this one is minimum 2,000 square feet. Now, next up, are there overlay districts? A floodplain overlay, hillside overlay, or is there a wildlife overlay? Over by Harris Ranch, they've got one there because it's a migratory path. Are there HOA rules or CC&Rs that are stricter than zoning? Yes, I just talked about one. And if your plan includes a shop, an ADU, or animals, what specifically is allowed? Will they allow the animals you're looking for? A lot of people will allow chickens, but no roosters. What if you want to put in a dozen horses, but the county says, nope, you don't have enough acreage for that. You can only have a half dozen. Zoning is basically permission, and all of that, again, really matters. But even if the zoning says yes, you still might not be able to build, because next up is access, and we're going to talk about that. But I just want to stop for a second and tell you, if you don't know me already, I'm Rick Powell. My family's been in real estate for the last 70 years. Kirsten and I have been associate brokers for over 20 years at this point and have been real estate investors for over 30 years. I obviously love dirt and wanted to have a channel dedicated exclusively to Idaho land and how to avoid costly mistakes with it. If you like what you're seeing, please do us a favor and subscribe, as that really hits the channel. All right? Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Second up, legal access. This is one that shocks out-of-state buyers quite a bit. You can buy land that looks accessible, like you can drive to it, and still not have legal access. Physical access is not the same as legal access. Legal access means you have a recorded right, like there's a recorded easement, or that the road is part of the property or whatever, but you have a recorded right to use a road, easement, or a frontage that connects you directly to a public right-of-way so you can get ingress and egress in and out of the parcel. If your access is across somebody else's land, you will need a recorded easement that's valid, correctly located, and actually usable. Now, what does correctly located mean? Meaning that it's on a map of the parcel saying this is exactly where the easement is, it's this long, it's this wide, it's this far from the boundary, and you know exactly where it is, and that's where that particular road is. It's important. It's got to be actually usable and recorded. And sometimes that easement exists, but it's not buildable access. It might be too narrow. It might not be maintained, meaning county doesn't maintain it. There's no written maintenance agreement between the property owners. You have a big, let's say you had, like 2 years ago, we had one of the rainiest springs we've ever had, and you had so much rain that it actually eroded things away. That might keep it from having access. It may not allow emergency vehicle access. It might not be in the location people assume it is. There are major differences between public road frontage and a private road with a maintenance agreement, a shared driveway easement, and a, well, we've always driven here situation, and we see that way too often. The last one is not a plan, so before you write the offer, you want to confirm, do I have a recorded legal access to a public road for getting in and out of my property? And what type of access is it? Is it a frontage? Is it easement? Or is it a private road that I have to go through? If it is a private road, is there a maintenance agreement? Can I see a copy of it prior to going into escrow? Is the access width and surface adequate for building and emergency services? Meaning, can I get a big truck in there if I'm bringing dump trucks in or if I'm bringing in trailers with excavators on it? Can they get in through there? And if there is a fire, can a big fire truck get through there? Because even if zoning says yes, if access is unclear, you slow down. Now, let's say zoning is good and access is good. The land still has to function, which brings us to water. And as you've heard me say a million times if you watch any of our other videos, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting, because water means everything when it comes to land. So, our third point is water. In Idaho, water is not one thing. Most buyers think, well, is there a well? But we really have to have two separate conversations and investigations. Number one, domestic water. And that's what you drink, you bathe in it, you use in the house. All right. That's one that you got to take a look at. The second one is irrigation water. What keeps landscaping, the pasture, and crops alive when it's running? They're not the same and they are not interchangeable and they're not year round either. But for domestic water, your options are typically a private well, or a shared well agreement, or a community system, or city water in some areas that you can tie in. But usually, when we're talking land like this, you're talking a well. But even if a well is possible, you need to think about this. How deep do you have to drill and what that costs? So let's talk about this for a second. Just for the drilling on a normal standard well drill right now, and this is February of 2026, you're looking at anywhere between 75 and 85 dollars per down foot. That doesn't include, that's not the cost of the well. This is just the cost of drilling. Figure 75 to 85 bucks a foot. And then you still need your top end, you need your casing, you need your drop pipe, you need the pump down at the bottom, you need a pressure tank up top. I mean, for a 240, 250 foot well right now, assuming there's no complications and it's not really a sandy area or you're hitting boulders on the way down like you would up in the mountains, you're at $40,000, $50,000 pretty quick. I mean, 40,000 is a real number for a 240-foot well. And if you're in an area of concern where you got to seal the well, that you got to go by 240 feet, probably, somewhere between 6,500, 7,500 feet of concrete on that. I'm sorry, pounds of concrete, not feet. Uh, it just keeps getting more and more expensive. So if you got to drill the well, you got to have the budget for it. So that's one conversation about the well. Second one is water quality. How good is it? Third one is the yield. How much water can you pump out of that, and will that meet the needs that you have? I mean, and again, if it's a domestic well, you're limited to 13,500 gallons per day, and then you have an additional half acre you can irrigate with that if you had to, or you can use that water for livestock, or if you have horses, you can water the horses with that, or it's up to a half acre on top of the 13,500 gallons that you get every day. So, is there enough yield coming out of the well, meaning how many gallons per minute you're getting to hit that number, or at least hit the number for your needs? Are there local restrictions? The local restrictions that in a drought year you would get restrictions. Domestic water right wells are exempt from most drought restrictions when it comes to people higher up on the seniority list on the water rights. But sometimes a local restriction off the top of my head would be like down in Cuna, you have very high water table, and you also have an area of groundwater concern, meaning it's got high nitrates in it because it's historically been a either agriculture, well, it's all agriculture, whether it's livestock or if it's crops, either from too much, not too much, but so much nitrogen in chemical fertilizer. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So much fertilizer going into the surface soil that it's leaching down into the aquifer, or you have so many animals that the nitrate coming out of their waste is getting down there to where it's starting to elevate some. If it's too high, they won't let you drill at all. But usually in like in Southwest Cuna, actually almost all of South Cuna, you are in an area of groundwater concern, so they're going to make you seal the well, meaning that concrete that I was talking about a minute ago. You're going to drill, drop your casing, but then you've got to seal from the surface down to the top of the production zone down in the aquifer, and that's additional money. So that would be a little type of local restriction. And whether the parcel already has a documented well, or whether you're relying it on it should be possible. And the well itself is other questions too. How old is the well? When was the last time the pump was replaced? When was the last time it was tested? All things we're going to talk about and look at. All right, so that's the well, that's the domestic side. Let's talk now about irrigation. And irrigation here is the ditches you see all over the side. They're dry this time of year, but we get to, depending on the weather, of course, but you figure towards the end of April, early May, if it's warm enough, they start letting the water out of the reservoirs and they start diverting it from the Boise River. And then all of a sudden, all the irrigation channels start filling up, which is great. And now you have your irrigation water. And people get surprised by what's available and what's not. You might see water rights included, or you might assume because you're in Idaho and let's say there's an irrigation canal right next to the piece of dirt that the water's no problem. But irrigation usually comes from an irrigation district. Pressurized irrigation systems, canals, or deeded rights. They each have different rules, costs, and most importantly, availability. And some land has no irrigation access at all. No irrigation access. What does that mean? So, it could be a number of things. Number one, let's say it's a 20-acre parcel up North Idaho City in the mountains, and they've just never been a well, and it's not near a creek or a stream. That could be a scenario. Another scenario is the previous parcel owner, let's say they had water rights or water shares, but they didn't beneficially use them for 5 years. In Idaho, if you don't beneficially use that water for a period of 5 years, your water rights or your water shares go away. Now you can reapply for them and get them again, most likely. But it depends whether it's a good or bad story. On the water rights side, it has more impact because Idaho is a first in time, first in right state for water rights, meaning the earlier the water right was granted to the parcel, the more senior it is on the list. And in drought year, when water's being, threatened, not threatened, but when it's getting more scarce, the senior water rights holders have to get their their draw taken care of before the junior water rights guys get taken care of. So if you're at the bottom of the list and it's a severe drought year, and the senior water rights holder are pulling all the water off to do their crops or their animals or whatever they're doing with it, you may not get enough water, or and it's in the most extreme example, you wouldn't get any water. So seniority matters on that. Now the better story is on the water share side, on the irrigation district. So irrigation district shares, there's no seniority. They're all the same no matter when they were given, because the water rights seniority belongs to the irrigation district itself, and they're almost always at the top of the list. So if you have irrigation shares, water shares with the irrigation district, seniority is not an issue. If it's a water right you have to reapply for, you're at the bottom of the seniority list. So we always try to find a parcel that, as long as it meets all of your needs, either with the water right in place or with the well in place. So you do have that seniority. You can always re-drill a well. It's not cheap, understood. But drilling a new well doesn't affect your water right. So good thing there. So here are the red flags to investigate. When you see in the MLS description, buyer to verify water, well not installed, proposed well. Although a proposed well usually means that they've done their homework and is possible. Proposed septic, hopefully they've done a perk test. But, definitely looking hard at both those questions. Irrigation available nearby, potential for well. I mean, all dirt has the potential for a well. And, or if you see water rights believed to be, like Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. So we're looking at all those things. So in land, the word potential can be very expensive if it turns out that it actually wasn't potential. So before you write an offer, what is the domestic water source? Is it a well? Is it a shared well? Is it municipal water, or is there none and you're going to have to drill? If it is a well, is there an existing well log that shows the depth, the yield, the quality info? Usually when they drill it, there'll be the well driller info sheet that you can pull off the Idaho Department of Water Resources website. That's always fun to find those too. But is that available? If not, can we find it? And if we can't find it, which does happen, matter of fact, I'm in a deal right now on a piece of dirt where the well's there. We've tested the well, everything's fine. but it does not show up on the Idaho Department of Water Resources website. You can't find it on the locator. Weird. All right. So, do we have that info? Is irrigation available? What district are we going to have to work with? What does it cost? And is it available? I mean, when you call the water district, is it available? If the water rights are included, what exactly is the right? Meaning, how many acre feet is it? What flow? Is it transferable? And how is it documented? Now, the water rights, again, are either going to be surface water coming out of a river, creek, or tributary, or subsurface, meaning it's coming out of the aquifer. And if it's irrigation, 99 times out of 100 is coming out of the canal. So, looking at zoning, access, and water. And now we get into the category that causes the most heartbreak: septic in soils, our fourth stop on this little journey here. So, a lot of land, dirt, outside the city services needs septic, meaning if you're going to build a house on it, you're going to have a septic system for instead of a sewer. All right. And septic is not automatic, meaning it's not automatic that you can build a septic system on the property. You need a system that's approved based on soils, slope, water table, and setbacks. All of those affect what type of system you can have. In some areas, standard system won't work. We were talking about CUNA earlier. Very, very high water table. You've got to go to a mound system is the most common one I see, where it's very, very shallow for the drain field, the leach field, like 18 inches or so. And then you have mounds of dirt over the top of that side. You have gravel above and below, but it's basically just below the surface, where a normal septic leach field will be 3-4 feet down. So, and that adds cost. That goes from being as of today, like a $10,000 to $12,000 septic system is now a $20,000 to $25,000 septic system when you have to make something unusual like that. You may need an engineered system, which is another term for mound, but it's it's going to significantly increase your cost. You'll hear people say things like it perks or it passed perk. That's a start, not the finish. You want to know, when was the test done? That's important, because if they did a full blown perk test and paid it's almost $2,000 right now as of today to get a perk test done in Ada or Canyon County, that expires. If they don't renew it every year, it's expired and you got to start from scratch. You can't use any part of it. If you do a proposed septic test, then that doesn't expire. It's a specific way you do it with Central or Southwest District Health, and you only pay half. You pay like $950 instead of $1,900, whatever it is. And it's literally just proposed. They'll say, okay, you need to execute XYZ. You need to have this type system, whether it's engineered or standard, and it needs to be within 50 feet of this part here. Because when you do your perk test, you actually draw out. You have basically you take like a survey that's already been done, or the closest thing you have to survey, and you map out. Here's the boundaries of the parcel. Here's where the well's located. Here's where I want to put the house. Here's where I put the septic, and then you want to measure how far it is from the side of the property, how far from the well to the septic, because it's got to be over 100 feet. And you put all those things down, and you submit that with the permit application, and then they come out and they'll take care of it. But you want to know when the test was done, who did it? Was it Central District Health? Is it Southwest District Health? Who was the excavator? Who's the plumber? Is there a plumber or septic company involved with it? You got to know all that things. What part of the property was it? It has to be I'm trying to say the permit has to be within 50 feet of where the test was conducted. So if that's not where you want the house and the septic system, well, more importantly, where the septic system is, you have a problem. Was the approval on the permit for a standard system or for an engineered system? And again, does the approval still apply, or do you need an updated evaluation? So if they did the proposed only and just paid the half of the permit process, so they don't have to renew it every year, then you will need to pay the additional balance due on the permit to make it a full-blown acceptable permit so you can install the septic. And then if there's any changes or if you're moving more than 50 foot away, you got to start all over again. So we need to know where that sits. And septic tank setbacks can shrink the buildable envelope really fast, because you have to be set back so much from the well. You have to be set back so much from property lines. You have to be set back from water features. You have to be set back from drain fields. So it's not just the tank itself. I mean, there's all kinds of little moving parts that affect all of this. So yes, a parcel can be large and still have a very small usable building area once the septic and all the other easements are mapped. So before you write an offer, we want to confirm, will this parcel qualify for septic approval? Now, that's actually kind of backwards. You almost have to get into escrow if the listing agent or the seller has not already done a perk test. You basically have to be in escrow and in your due diligence period where you pay for the septic perk test. So if they haven't done it prior to going on market, then you kind of have to write the offer to get into escrow for it. So that's kind of misleading there. Sorry about that. So, and is the existing septic an approval or a permit? What type of system is required, standard or engineered? What are the suitable drain field locations? We talked about the septic tank, and then we have the drain field. But once you figure out how big the drain field is going to be, does that still dovetail in with where you want the house and how you want the house aligned and all the other setbacks that are out there? And what are the realistic installation costs in the area for that particular parcel for the type of soils you have right there? So even if septic is possible, you can still get blocked by environmental and site constraints, which brings us to number 5. Environmental and site constraints. All right, almost there. So thanks for hanging out. We're getting towards the end here. And I know some of this is boring, but if you're really looking at dirt, these things matter because they can cost you just all the money. So we don't want that. All right. So a property can look dry most of the year and still be mapped in a floodplain, or even worse, a floodway. Floodplain itself is not always a deal breaker, but it can require special elevation requirements, like having to build a pad before you put the house up. Engineered plans, definitely higher insurance costs because you might most likely will have to have flood insurance, and stricter permitting. They're going to look at things a little bit harder as far as how your foundation's done. Do you have a sump pump? What things are you doing to mitigate the possibility of the floodplain or flood water coming through there? Now get away from that. Then we have wetlands, riparian setbacks, protected habitat, and special overlays, especially near foothills, drainage corridors, or environmentally sensitive areas. And here's what's tricky. You might not visually see it. It might look like cute seasonal drainage, but the county treats it as a regulated feature. And then there's slope. I mean, gosh, foothills can require geotechnical reports, engineered foundations, retaining walls, driveway grade requirements, erosion control plans. And even if you can do all that, you may not be able to afford to do all that. So it turns what looked like a very cheap lot into a ridiculously expensive build. So at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, how do I verify all this before I buy? Let's make it simple. Here's the most practical way to think about buildability in Idaho. You need 5 green lights. Well, yeah, 5 green lights before you write an offer, or at least as contract contingencies with enough time to verify. And that's our due diligence period. If you're buying a house, it's called the inspection period. But when you're buying dirt, it's called due diligence. And we typically have much longer due diligence periods on dirt than we do on houses. I mean, minimum 30 days, and quite honestly, if depending on what we're trying to do and what issues we know going into it, whether it be topography or high water table, whatever the issues going into it that we know about, that could extend that. I mean, it could be a 6-month escrow with a 120-day due diligence period, depending. So, we should always have enough due diligence to do the things we need to find out. But if you can't find out the hard answers, the firm answers going into it, at least we have them as contingencies for due diligence. All right. So green light number 1, zoning supports your intended use. Green light number 2, the legal access in and out of the property is recorded and buildable, meaning all those big vehicles can get through, emergency vehicles can get through, for fire trucks. Everything's great. No problem getting in and out. Green light number 3, water is confirmed, domestic and irrigation if you need the irrigation. Green light number 4, septic is approvable for the home you want. Green light number 5, the site constraints are known, whether it be floodplain, slope, wetlands, and setbacks. So if any of these is unclear, you certainly slow down, but it's all part of our due diligence period too. Not because you're being difficult, but because land is where people lose money by assuming. So What's the big mistake that everybody makes that costs them the deal? Well, it's usually they didn't do these five things up front, but honestly, the biggest issue, biggest mistake we see people make on when they're buying land to build a house or build whatever they're trying to build, they don't properly budget for all these things in it, plus the build of the home. You know, in every land video we've done, whether it's on this channel or on another channel for our residential side, we talk about the budget. The budget is so critical. You have to start with the end in mind. It used to be the old Franklin Covey. Well, I say it's still Franklin Covey, but beginning with the end in mind, part of the 7 habits of successful people. So you know in your mind what you want to build. Do you have the budget to do it? Because you've got the acquisition cost of the land, but then you have the development cost of the land. Well, not that you're going to develop it to subdivide it and build a neighborhood, but just the improvements you have to build in to build your home. You have to build the well. Are you drilling a well and do you have the money for that? We have to get the septic in, get the perk test done, figure out you have to do a engineered system or a mound system instead of a standard system. So now you've doubled your septic cost. All right, so there goes more money. If you are near a floodplain or a floodway, forget the floodway, but you say a floodplain, or a high water table for that matter, now you've got to build a pad before you can start doing your foundation. That's more money. Do you have to move a lot of dirt? That's ridiculously expensive. Are you going to, if you're up in the foothills, are you going to have to build a truly engineered foundation? Like, are you doing pillars all the way down? Are you doing, are you spending $150,000 just on the foundation before you even start on the house, or $500,000 on the foundation? Who knows? But the biggest mistake that people make, and this is critical, is not budgeting enough for the build side and the development side when they buy the land. They're thinking, okay, I can afford a $600,000 piece of dirt, no problem. So I wanted to buy $1 million house. I'm spending $600,000 on the dirt, so I just need to have $400,000 for the house. Wrong. That is not the case. So don't make that mistake. We'll help you as much as possible. The custom builders we work with can certainly give you guidance on what it's going to cost to build your house once they have an idea of what we're looking at. But there's so many. They're not hidden costs, but if you've never built a house before, they're unexpected costs. I mean, architect's going to run you, anywhere from $12,000 to $50,000 depending on what you're trying to build. You know, moving dirt, the excavation side, very expensive. Building a well. Unless you have a very very shallow aquifer, you're going to be north of $40,000 in a heartbeat. Septic can run you anywhere from 12 to 20,000, 25,000, depending on the soils. So that's one of the things we really you'll have to look at is, can you afford to build what you're trying to build after you've acquired the land? Because nobody enjoys buying the land, going through the rush and all the satisfaction that comes on buying what you think is your dream piece of dirt, and then coming to the horrible realization that you don't have the capital to build out what you wanted to. So we're going to try to help you avoid that in every case we can. But sometimes, the dream's not attainable, even if everything goes right on the dirt. That the budget's right for the development, the budget's right for the acquisition, but by the time you spend all that money, there's just nothing left over, and you don't want to go into debt, or you can't go into debt high enough to build what you want. So let's avoid that problem by talking up front. Begin with the end in mind. We talk about your vision. If you're building a custom home, talk to the builders, figure out roughly, I say roughly, they'll get you in a good neighborhood of what it should cost. And then when we get down to specific dirt, then we can figure out, is the development feasible or not financially, assuming that all the other things work. So that's what we have. Is all land in Idaho buildable? No, but most is. So thank you for watching. We sincerely appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions on dirt, give me a call. My name again is Rick Powell. My number is 208-872-8108. Or you can send me an email at rick@powellgroupidaho.com. I'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.